Hey guys, welcome back. It's Rook. Oh, you thought this deck was gone, didn't you? You thought that Dark Moth fell off the face of the earth when the Battle City box came out, and you never wanted to hear that name again. Well, I got news for you. I have revamped the Dark Moth deck with cards that came out in the Battle City box, and the deck's still pretty strong. I mean, the Dark Moth synergy and that loop was always strong. And it really doesn't go away. In fact, if you look, I don't have the stats on me, but if you look at some recent online tournaments, you see that Dark Moth, or just Moth in general, is still making somewhat of a presence. Not as explosive and cool as Magnets, XYZs, the Interconflict Monarchs that we're seeing a lot now, as well as other archetypes from the box that people might be playing around with. But Dark Moth is still viable, and I have updated my Dark Moth deck for February 2021 for those of you that are still looking to play this nasty insect. I'm going to go ahead and break this deck down for you guys. I'll lay it card by card, so if you just want the deck list, skip to the end. I don't blame you, whatever. If you guys like me and want to hear my whole spiel, let's do it. Also, this is a good time to plug my stickers, guys. I'm still selling stickers on Etsy. That link's in the description below. It's a sticker of my logo, $2.50. Go grab yourself one of those. Let's get started. We're starting with the skill. We have the Cocoon of Ultra Evolution, which of course is a staple here, and we're running this with, is that in focus? Come on now. There we go. The Cocoon of Ultra Evolution here. That is a staple, and that is the skill that you're always going to use when you're using Moth. This is the card that allows you to essentially tribute your Parasite in order to special summon the perfectly ultimate Great Moth from your deck, ignoring its summoning conditions. It also has a secondary condition where you can shuffle an insect into your deck, shuffle the deck, and draw a card. So you can use both of these effects pretty much in sync by tributing your Parasite that might be equipped to a monster your opponent controls. You're getting the removal of that monster, you're getting your Moth out, and you can also shuffle that Parasite back into the deck to get another card draw. So very good. A lot of people like to burn both of those at once. Some people, maybe they're struggling to get the Moth play out. They can at least get that shuffle first, which is good. So Cocoon of Ultra Evolution continues to be a menace. Let's go to monsters, and you should be expecting the 3 Parasite Paranoid, of course. Running these in the Dark Moth. This is your win condition. This card can equip to an opponent's monster, and then of course in your main phase you can flip Cocoon of Ultra Evolution to tribute both in order to special summon your perfectly ultimate Great Moth from the deck. So a good time to play this card is if an opponent has a monster out and they're ending their turn end phase. It is a quick effect to equip Parasite to an opponent's monster. So we see a lot of equipping happening in the end phase, and that can catch your opponent off guard and allow you in your main phase, if there's no magic removal, to then go ahead and get your Cocoon play off. So 3 Parasite Paranoid, you're always going to see that in this deck. And then for the perfectly ultimate Great Moth themselves, we have 2. We're not running 3. 3 is too much of a brick. We didn't run 3 in the last one. We're running 2 perfectly ultimate Great Moth. We are running 2 because there is a chance that you can get both out on the field. If you've played against this deck, you've probably seen it happen. But when Parasite Paranoid leaves the field as part of Cocoon's effect, you can special summon a level 7 or higher insect monster from your hand if you have one. So if Parasite Paranoid leaves the field due to Cocoon's effect to get your perfectly ultimate Great Moth from your deck, if you have a perfectly ultimate Great Moth also in your hand, you can special summon that too. So that's why this deck is so explosive. If you have the double Moth play, you get one out of the deck and you get one from your hand. All of a sudden you have 2 3,500 attack monsters staring your opponent in the face, and a lot of them have trouble dealing with those. So that's why this deck is pretty strong and still maintains strength. With the Battle City box, we've seen a lot of cards come out to combat large monsters, some good removal, things that deal with special summons. But one, those are usually in the side deck, and the side deck's only 6 cards. Some people aren't planning to play against Moth with all the other decks we're seeing out there. And 2, they still have to obviously draw it and have that preparation. So perfectly ultimate Great Moth is still making a splash here. This is where the deck deviates a little bit. I did have 2 Gap the Divine Soldier in this deck the last time, and the reason I had Gap is because we were in a meta where people were afraid of Moth. So everyone was kind of nervously setting their monsters. They didn't want a monster in face-up attack position. That leaves it open to be parasited. You can't equip your Parasite to a set monster. So we ran Gap the Divine Soldier because Gap essentially allowed us to tribute for Gap, and then that forced your monster out in the open so that we could parasite it. But we aren't seeing that much tentativeness anymore in the format, as we're seeing a lot of special summon Magnet Warriors and Union monsters. So we toss Gap to the side, and we're going to just go ahead and run 2 Jinzo. Jinzo's a good option because this deck doesn't run a lot of traps. This deck only runs 3 traps, but most of the cards are monsters and spells. with less traps. You're not shooting yourself in the foot by running Jinzo because this deck doesn't have a lot of traps. So I replaced the tribute aspect of this deck with Jinzo instead of Gap, because Jinzo is an all-around pretty good card to shut traps down your opponent's side of the field. A lot of traps that could combat Dark Moth pretty easily, thinking about Widespread Ruin. Lost Wind, I think, would combat Moth, and a few others. Jinzo would shut those down, so Jinzo's a good play here. There are going to be some monsters you can get on the field that you can tribute for, so there's Jinzo for you. Moving on, we have 3 Breaker, the Magical Warrior. Before we had a little bit of Dekoichi, Battle Chant Locomotive, we maybe had some Nidoria. The deck flip-flopped between those. But I have 3 Breaker, the Magical Warrior, for a couple reasons. One, because Breaker is a solid staple. It is magic removal. It's a 1900 attack monster with a spell counter right away. You can remove the spell counter if you want to clear your opponent's back row. It's a magic removal. It clears the back row. And then it drops to 1600, but then it's still a 4-star monster out on the field. 1600 isn't that bad, and you can use it to tribute for Jinzo if you'd like. So Breaker is going to be really good there. And also, Breaker is a dark monster. It continues to fit the dark theme, which is fantastic, because that means we can still use Allure of Darkness pretty efficiently here, which I love the card draw with Allure of Darkness. So 3 Breaker, the Magical Warrior, to replace the Nidoria kind of and Dekoichis that we were running here. And then we do still have the 3 Sphere Kribo. Please, I apologize, one of these is common. Only 2 of them are the ultra rare. I don't know where my 3rd one went, but we have 3 Sphere Kribo, obviously rounding out the monsters here. Sphere Kribo, best hand trap in the game, and also dark targets for Allure of Darkness. So it's good defense, flips an opponent that's attacking into defense mode, and as a hand trap, so you drop that to the grave. It's also a good dark target for Allure of Darkness, so 3 Sphere Kribo. Spells, 3 Allure of Darkness. We're able to maintain Allure of Darkness here. This deck continues to be classified as a Dark Moth deck because of all the dark targets. We have 2 Jinzo, 3 Breaker, the Magical Warrior, and 3 Sphere Kribo, which is a lot for Allure of Darkness. So Allure is going to get you a lot of card draw. You draw 2 cards, then you have to banish a dark monster. 6 more cards left, 3 more spells, 3 Book of Moon. I don't have anything to say about Book of Moon that I haven't said in probably every video this year so far. Book of Moon is really solid. It flips a monster into face-down defense mode, so it's really good defense, and it can really mess with your opponent. It can get around Jinzo. A lot of great things about Book of Moon. A great quick play spell. And then the last card I'm running, I am running the 3 traps, and of course it's Zoma. You can't not run Zoma. I feel like this rounds out a 22-card deck, but I have the 2 Jinzo, and I was like, do I run? I can't run. Maybe I won't run Dusts. You know, I got Breaker. I won't run Widespread Ruin. I won't run Nightmare Wheel. Nightmare Wheel isn't that great anymore. And I'm like, but what about Zoma, though? I have to run Zoma. So I do have 3 Zoma in here. Zoma is a great card still, and will be for a long time, to splash into whatever deck you're playing, because it can act as a secondary win condition. If my Moth play doesn't work out, I still have a secondary win condition to win with something like Zoma the Spirit, because Zoma, it's just a trap that activates, and because if your opponent is trying to clear over Zoma, they're going to be taking damage equal to that monster that cleared over its attack, which, with a 4,000 life point base, that's a couple Zomas and you're dead. So always a good secondary win condition, and that rounds out the updated Dark Moth deck. So if you guys were looking to keep tinkering with this deck, I think that I found a couple ways where you can maintain the darkness with Allure of Darkness, featuring some solid staples, looking at you, Breaker, Book of Moon, and Jinzo, to update this deck pretty effectively. Other considerations, I could see splashing Dekoichi or Nidoria back in here. I think Nidoria might not work as well. A lot of people like monsters going to the graveyard now, so it's kind of hard to deal with that. Parasite is already putting things to the graveyard. But Dekoichi, I could see getting that for the card draw. You're already getting card draw with Allure of Darkness and Cocoon, so Dekoichi might be a little overkill. That's why I kind of took him out this time. I did favor Dekoichi over Nidoria, but Breaker the Magical Warrior is going to be solid, because there's your magic removal, and it's not a trap that something like Jinzo would negate. So there's your updated Dark Moth deck. Any comments, questions, please let me know, comments below. And I actually have a double feature here. I have a match recorded that we will be transitioning to right now, and I will be going into detail about my match against Casual Chaos that we played remote the other day. Alright guys, I'm going right into it. I am playing Casual Chaos here in this remote match we played the other day. I won the dice roll, so he's going first. He's already set in 2 back row here. I'm going to set up my play using the exact deck that I just profiled. We got Breaker the Magical Warrior here going for the back row, removing the spell counter right away. You can see he's playing kind of a different deck. Looks like he's trying to play around fairies, because he's got Ishizu as the skill there. That probably is Rise of the Fallen. So my breaker counter hit his Zoma. I set a back row and I passed. So here's his first monster. That's going to be some easy Parasite Prey. That's the Zolga, actually. We don't see that too often. So Zolga is a 4-star monster, and if a monster is tribute summoned by tributing the card, you gain 2,000 life points. So he's looking for the life point gain. Rise of the Fallen also deals with life point gain as well. Zolga's 1,700 attack, so he's actually going to beat over my breaker, the Magical Warrior, for a difference of 100. But I do have the Parasite Paranoid in the end phase, and it doesn't look like he has magic removal there. So I draw. Going to my main phase, I'm going right for the Cocoon, and let's get that perfectly ultimate Great Moth out. So Parasite hits the graveyard. If I have another Moth in my hand, I can summon it, but I do not. I just have the one that I'm getting from the deck this time. I'm using the secondary effect of Cocoon to also shuffle Parasite back into the deck to draw a card. So my Cocoon skill is totally spent. I have another Breaker, the Magical Warrior, very lucky, and we're going for game here. We used the counter to remove the last back row that he had, which was a Jar of Avarice, so it wasn't going to do him much, but then I had an OTK there in that first game, so unfortunately didn't see many fairies there except for Zolga. Going into game 2, Casual Chaos is going to go ahead and go second. I actually went first, and I did a hard pass. So Casual Chaos is Foolish Burialing a Zolga, clearly setting up for the Rise of the Fallen play, which Rise of the Fallen, I had to look this up. What is it? You activate it to special summon a level 4 fairy or lower fairy from your graveyard, so he's going to do that later. He's got Giant Rat, and he's going to swing at me right in the face for 14. That's going to go through. That puts me down to 26. End phase, I have Parasite, so I had the Parasite play in my hand set up. I just needed him to show some monsters. So he's got a pretty scary back row, but I start with Breaker on my turn, and I pop the Jar of Avarice, which isn't that helpful for me, but then I'm going to go ahead and start with the Cocoon play. So Giant Rat goes to the graveyard, and it was not destroyed by battle, so Giant Rat's effect doesn't go off, and I tribute, get the Moth out, shuffle the Paranoid back into my deck for the draw, and I also have a Moth in my hand, so we're seeing probably one of the most devastating fields that you can see this early with using the Moth deck, with both Moths out and a Breaker. So I go to attack, and I'm trying to win for game here, but he's got the Zoma. So now I got to really think about it. So I canceled my attack with my first Moth. I beat over the Zoma with the Breaker so that it dropped me to 1,000. Otherwise, I was going to die trying to swing into it with Moth. And then I swing into him with the second Moth, so that puts him to 500. So almost OTK. That's a great example of Zoma just being a great win condition in itself if you're playing against some heavy hitters here. So he's going to activate Rise of the Fallen. He's going to get Zolga back from the graveyard, and he's actually going to gain life points equal to its original attack. So that actually bumps him up to 2,200. And Zolga's effect is if a monster is tribute summoned by tributing the card, you gain 2,000 life points. So I'm thinking that his goal here is to be able to Rise of the Fall on it, and then be able to tribute for something like Air Knight Parshath or some other fairies that we're seeing. But he actually has 2 Zolgas. One of them in attack mode, he just normal summon that one. He's going to go into battle. And he was going to try and swing over a Breaker there for a difference of 100. I got the Book of Moon, so I put him face down defense. Breaker clears one Zolga, Moth clears the other, and that is going to be game 2. So, you know, it wasn't a totally competitive deck that Casual Chaos was playing, but just a little bit of an example of how completely overkill the Dark Moth deck can be, especially when you get the double Moths out like that. So I hope you guys took something away from that, learned something about the Dark Moth deck, and definitely think that it's still strong and still going to hang around. So thanks, guys. I'll catch you later.